Welcome back to another episode of Together is Better. I'm Jeff Clark with Nitor, and today I am privileged and honored to have as my guest Vicky Revis, who is the Chief Revenue Officer for SAP Fieldglass.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What an exciting time. You know, I was talking with Peter Growlish earlier today, and we were talking about the pace of change and the pace of innovation today. Tell me about your excitement about Sapphire and some of the things that are most interesting for you to share with your customers.
My goodness, what a time to be in the software industry.
100%.
It's the pace of change, as you said, is absolutely dizzying.
Yes.
And for me, you know, with the risk of sounding like a stuck record, Agentic AI is going to fundamentally pivot how organizations look at software, how they roll it out, how they drive change in their organization, but also how they structure their organizations for the future themselves.
100%.
So historic implementations of software was about digitizing manual processes and driving efficiencies, as it should have been. For me, this is the pivotal point where we're really going to throw everything up in the air, and what we always knew and what organizations always knew about implementing software and driving value from it will change and accelerate.
We talked about that a lot. And I talk to customers all day long about this as well, which is, you know, if you go rewind back 10 years, 5 years even, everything that you assumed in the way that it would operate or the way your organization in particular what needed to be structured has to be re-examined now or you were going to be left behind. You know, the way that you used to operate your business is no longer the way that you'll probably do it in the next 3 to 5 years, without a doubt. You know, Agentic AI, how you leverage it, the different categories that you can focus on if you're in procurement as well. All of that's going to be under examination again. And I think you got to take a step back a little bit as you're looking through all of it. Organizationally, what do you see that's probably the biggest change?
Organizationally inside SAP or for our customers?
Oh, let's talk about both.
Okay.
How do you think things are changing even within SAP right now from it?
Yeah, so within SAP, as I say, all we knew around digitizing processes and implementing SaaS in the old world of fit to standard, et cetera. You know, critically what that evolves into is AI is great, but AI doesn't work without structured data. Correct. So we become the enablers of structured data that then allows for agentic AI and then the providers of robust and complete agentic AI solutions that can drive off of that structured data. So for us, being able to then partner with our customers and partner with our ecosystem as well on what does a transformation inside a customer look like in order to be successful. Because their business is also transforming. The way that they went to market is going to get disrupted. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of hype around AI and it's going to change the world and jobs are going to... For me, we are now closer than ever and we are on the verge of it really now disrupting. And quite frankly, agentic AI has got to actually deliver the game-changing results to organizations.
Yeah, I think there's been a promise, right, or an expectations, I should say.
Yeah.
And now you're starting to see it in reality. And I agree with you. We talked a little bit about this on some of the other episodes as well, which is, you know, how disruptive is that really going to be?
Yep.
And look, there's going to be a process that companies go through. But right now, certainly, if you're an SAP customer, if you're a Fieldglass customer, right, you know, what is the prioritization of that? And I think it's kind of a self-assessment in some ways. Okay, are we organizationally ready? Do we have the capacity to change? What's the pace and rate of that change and impact of that? And then where do we start? So when you're talking to Fieldglass customers, for example, where do you say, this is what you need to be thinking of with the product evolution? Is there a way that you're kind of counseling when you're talking to senior executives about where the application itself is going and the things they need to be expecting and getting ready for?
So I think I come from a bit of a unique situation because of the depth of categories we can address. If you look at services inside an organization and just the fundamental differences between the way that you will go to market between purchasing, marketing services, maintenance, IT, there is such a depth out there that essentially it's always been a nonlinear process.
Right.
So adopting Fieldglass to underpin that process has always been about transformation. So now with the AI revolution, that just accelerates the transformation because the process is nonlinear. It's not a straightforward, I'm going to raise a purchase requisition, I'm going to have that purchase requisition approved, I'm going to receipt that purchase requisition. There is so much variance in there. If I look at the depth of, look, we're at a conference this week. Marketing services is a great example.
100%.
Those marketing services could be, I want to outsource my content and my branding, to I need to outsource building sets behind us. That depth and that sourcing process will vary so significantly even within that marketing category.
Right.
So organizations, and that's where for me agentic AI can kind of rip up what we knew about having to necessarily build every workflow to cater for every individual, and about also having to drive the change and transformation inside an organization. Biggest barrier to adoption is change management. It's never typically the software, but it's also where organizations and very shoehorn
Yeah.
manual processes into an application, and the first thing that happens is the users go, "Oh, that application's rubbish," because we've just got so many fields that we're presented with, and it's design decisions. Whereas we can flatten a lot of that and soften a lot of that, where fields are needed to drive business processes behind. We can present an experience layer to the end user that simplifies a lot of that engagement.
It nails the adoption component
Hugely.
in a way where it was somewhat constrained. And look, services procurement is hard in some cases. And it really was focused on a couple of those core areas, like you just mentioned, whether it's MRO, IT, et cetera. And the ability to now widen that into more categories, and especially smooth out if they're in this nonlinear process with different agents and infrastructure behind it, I think is now ready. Right,
It is.
for the market. And customers really want that.
And it's going to evolve at such a pace.
Sure.
We have to meet customers where they're at, because everybody does these processes slightly differently. So how do we bring in and build from productized agentic capability, and then build capability over and above to help bring that nuance of process? It's not about customizing a process, it's about customizing that engagement layer and the extensibility now, which is a shift.
Yeah, it is. And I think the user experience component becomes so far more, well, it'll be far superior than what it is today. Because if you contextualize that, in a context layer and saying, here's what I really need to go do. And then the agent layer that's behind that can then go drive that fulfillment of that in a different way, and touching in structured and unstructured data environments as well.
Yeah.
Right. Which is really where the customer complexity really comes in and resides. So that's going to be, I think, a paradigm shift for customers. It doesn't happen overnight though. No. Right. And so as you're out there in the field and you're talking to different customers, what are the immediate concerns that they have? So we've heard some that have been like, okay, how do I make sure that I prevent hallucination in that? Or, how can I measure success or efficiency in that? What's top of mind for the customers when you're talking about AI and an agentic world?
Absolutely. LLM engagement. How do we control and get the outcomes? How do we make sure our data is safe and secure in those environments? How do we make sure that we're getting the right outcomes? Which is why I think we will go from transactional into that kind of thought layer of agentic AI, and then really transformational. But I think it's a stepping stone journey for customers. Ultimately, you've got to have some structured data in order to do that, to mitigate and minimize hallucinations also. Right. If you're going out and pulling data from unstructured sources across the organization, how do you make sure that that really is going to return the right results? Have you got that data categorized in the right way?
Yeah, and to me, it's that issue around the controls, right? The right guardrails. This has been a common topic for everybody, which is like if you kind of step out of the noise of the news cycles, around SaaS apocalypse and all this other stuff, and you start really looking at, okay, if I'm a customer operating a business and I've got a fiduciary duty to ensure that I have to go through a regulatory process or an audit or all these other pieces, that the fidelity of that information that these agents are orchestrating for me is legitimate and real. And so SAP, I think, has done a really good job of trying to architect that with caution and concern for the customer. And, it is going to be this iterative journey. But one thing that you and I have always agreed on is the pace of this. It is not I'm going to wait and see how things flush out. It is, I have to make some forward progress in this as fast as possible, or you will be left behind.
It doesn't need to be perfect.
It doesn't
needs
need
to be progress.
Yeah.
But I think that's
a great way. I love that. It doesn't have to be perfect, if I may interrupt. It just has to be progress.
It does.
It's brilliant.
Because we all,
So true.
regardless of our jobs, have to demonstrate progress.
Yep.
The ability to wait is no longer there.
Right.
Or to say that we need 6 months to build. AI helps speed up the development process also.
Right.
How do we make sure we harness that? But also, how do we make sure we take AI and look at what customers are using and then bring that to the fore for other customers as well?
Yeah. I wonder if, because this will probably air after Sapphire, are there any big reveals that are happening from the Fieldglass side? But if you could just give us a sneak peek. Staying safe contained here.
I think the key for us, obviously, is the agentic capability and what our roadmap will look like. There's a small number, but then with the intent of how we go forward across agentic capability across the suite. Because I think for Fieldglass, one of the key areas is the depth of categories that we address touch every part of the business.
Yes.
And the outcomes we deliver touch more than just procurement, more than just HR. Actually, when you look at the way that work gets done inside an organization and gets outsourced, you've got operations, maintenance, the CFO from a risk and compliance standpoint. So the key around, the autonomous enterprise is really how do we provide that agentic orchestration across all of those stakeholders.
Right.
It's often been a barrier to adoption as well, because you've got so many stakeholders that benefit. It becomes the accountability of everybody, but sometimes the responsibility to fix the problem of nobody.
Well, to me, the way you describe that, it becomes really, Fieldglass becomes one of the most critical tools, right? Because of that ability to touch so many different aspects within the enterprise, right? And so, expanding those categories and having the depth and breadth that SAP has, the understanding of all those categories becomes super valuable if it's leveraged properly, right, within an organization. And I think, my experience has been, companies love it, and they got started strong and they focused on a couple of core categories, but they saw so much untapped opportunity that was out there. And so I think this kind of re-energizes that customer base a little bit and says, wow, okay, let's have another conversation about what else we can do.
I think one of the key areas, and this isn't a Sapphire, a net pre-announcement, but the May release we just had brings together a lot of the capabilities for the asset-intensive industry.
Yes.
If you look at workforce that maintains assets across oil and gas, mining, manufacturing, critical assets, they have to go through maintenance schedules.
Yes.
And when they're offline, they're not delivering revenue back to your organization. Well, who makes sure that those assets are maintained when the services comes up either in planned or unplanned maintenance? Right. It's typically the external workforce. Yeah. So a lot of the capability that we're focusing on, and then how we enrich that with agentic capability, is that category of workforce. And as you say, a lot of organizations got started in contingent workforce, time and materials, IT services, bit of marketing. Now it's really looking at the full extent of how work gets done in the organization, not on the payroll. You look at innovation that comes in, you look at maintaining critical assets and infrastructure. Most of that doesn't get done on the payroll. Mm-hmm. And as organizations also need to, we've talked about the disruptive world of agentic AI and how organizations need to look at how they do business. But the mix of outsourcing and insourcing will create the flexibility that organizations need in order to be able to pivot as well. Mm-hmm. But having the right controls. I talked about having, that asset-rich space. Well, those people are going out and maintaining oil rigs or mining capability. So health and safety becomes an issue.
Yes.
And then it's not a procurement conversation. It's a risk and an HR conversation. Yeah. And the risk of not doing it is so critical.
Yeah. Yeah, the asset-intensive to me, just look at the world right now. Look at the data center build-out. Look at the utility build-out, right? If they started to focus on that at the category level and all the complexities that are added into that, they have to have a solution like a Fieldglass and expand that into that. because it's how many different things it's going to reach. And to your point, what is the dollar value of a well that's down for an hour, or a data center that's down for an hour or 3 hours, unplanned maintenance, right? And then the orchestration behind that. Field services was always a massive pain for all of our oil and gas customers, right? And you're trying to tie that back into a service entry sheet, and the orchestration between that and the requisition, it became cumbersome in a way, just because of all the different people that had to go touch it. And so now, to your point, that ability to have it agentically processed at the workflow level, I think is going to speed things up, and a lot of it just lead them into a better world, right? To where their infrastructure is up for longer.
Our key vision is we want to be at the heart of the orchestration of how work gets done inside the organization. Whether that's work on the payroll, off the payroll, we partner with success factors, and that worker mix changes depending upon the category. But if you look at the criticality of that space, having the right, certifications, having the right, speed to that onboarding. I've got a customer that achieved their shutdown and turnaround 7 days ahead of schedule, as a result of being able to speed down that process, make sure that they had contract compliance, make sure that they had the right health and safety sort of certifications. And that's where Agentic AI, historically that process used to be a manual process where you check certificates and make. Agentic AI can take care. I was at a customer event last week and I demoed it in front of customers, and people were literally like, wow.
We've been waiting for that.
Yeah. Right? In terms of unlocking value and demonstrating the value, well, there are teams of people validating documentation and certifications. And of course, there needs to be a human in the loop.
Yes.
No organization is going to let the keys of the castle, so to speak, to Agentic AI at this point. There has to be a human in the loop. So that's about where customers can determine their appetite to risk and their appetite to AI to be able to determine that. That's where SAP, I like our approach very much around it being responsible and reliable AI, but making sure there is the human in the loop. But comes back to then how organizations are transforming how they get work done as well.
Yeah, which is the right conversation to have, because, there's a layer of, and I use this all the time, I call it the discernment layer, right? Where's the deep expertise reside in that function? Right now, will you need 20 of those people in the future? No, right? You're going to need something less. But, the human in the loop is ultimately the arbiter of what happens with that information. And you make an interesting point too about, kind of who is that key stakeholder in these organizations. A lot of cases in those processes, it's the compliance officer.
It is.
It's,
if you look at the cost, one day, probably not on recording, I'll share some of the, horror stories that my customers have shared with me around not having the necessary checks and balances in this workforce. In the permanent workforce, it's all cared for. But in this workforce, it doesn't always in all countries have the same checks and balances in there.
No.
And when you look at global organizations that are operating in, across the globe with different legislation across the globe, you've got to be able to stand up as an organization and say, yes, we've cared for that in the right way, and here is our audit trail of how we've done that.
Yeah, because I think it's been either too hard or somewhat largely ignored in the horror stories, right? The impact to your brand, right? The lawsuits, the other things that pile up, I think sometimes get discounted. And maybe it was because the wrong person didn't have responsibility for it. And that's why I think the emergence of the compliance officer really is kind of a center focal point, and kind of like, hey, we really need to be thinking about these things, because this may not be important to you in this particular role, but man, if we get this wrong, right, the impact that's going to have on this business in this super fast world of information can be super negative too.
I think, as SAP across the kind of suite strategy, that's where we can be the enablers and aggregators of all of that data across the personas and across the processes in an organization to be able to present that right information to those decision makers.
Yeah, and that was always fragmented, right? I mean, even when, because I started with Ariba in 2008, we got acquired by SAP in 2012, and then you looked at, the great tools like the Fieldglass and success factors and all that. We're now kind of at that point where I think the the data and the interaction between it is now fully capable of crossing different boundaries.
Insights. Yeah.
Right. The intersection of that now, which is what customers have been looking for a long time. Right. And so that's the exciting thing that I'm hearing more and more about here at Sapphire too, which is, hey, there's a good energy around that. Like, hey, the dream is now kind of like realized to a degree, and the agentic world has made that largely possible.
It's identifying also, if you look, ultimately the ERP is the aggregator and source of so much. Where does demand come from?
Right.
Where does the risk come from? You know, if you look at asset schedules, etc., and what the sort of, as we used to call them, line of business sub-solution areas provide, is then the place where you can then get that transaction achieved. Mm-hmm. But then how do we bring the data back in, as you say, and present it in the right way? Yeah, it's exciting to see it really come to life.
What does a successful customer look like to you? Because you see and you touch everything, right? So when you think of a customer and your definition of success, what does that look like?
A customer for me that can stand up and say, we have achieved X, Y, and Z, and that is not, I've got this much spend under management or I've got this many workers.
Yeah.
It's a customer that can turn around and say, do you know what? We had that issue in our business, whether that was due to cost leakage, whether that was due to compliance, whether that was due to the time to get work done and onboarding in the application. And they can turn around and say, we achieved X, Y, and Z as a result of this, and this is how we did it. But also, these were our lessons learned. Because, we can come as a technology provider and say, these are all the things that we've seen. But we're not on the ground in our customers' organizations. That's for our customers and our ecosystem as well. And those lessons learned and how they then advocate and share that with other customers, that's what good looks like for me.
All right. That's a good description of that. Where does the partner fit in with that? Because again, it's not just about, the technology itself and the application and the customer. There's so many people that are touching it. Mm-hmm. What's the partner's role? It had been just implementation. What is it going forward?
So my old world was leading our services organization. Yeah. And a transformation underpinned by Fieldglass is actually never just a technology implementation. You are never digitizing a single linear process, which you might have done in some of the other applications. Mm. For me, it's about driving that transformation inside an organization to allow the software to be successful. So how does the organization need to operationally set themselves up? How do we make sure that the organization don't just want to systemize all the existing processes? Because if you look end to end at we've got end to end process in terms of sourcing, workforce onboarding that touches so many parts of the organization, that having a partner that can really help drive that in an organization so that they can set themselves up for success. Yeah. Because when you ask me what success looks like for a customer, what success never looks like is if we're trying to come in and say, right, we've got these many fields we need to collect and we need this process and we want, that's not what success looks like. Right. And that's where we end up with friction on any customer project.
Yeah. I think that used to be the world.
Yep.
Right. And there was, it's almost like you get institutionalized on what software was and how it implemented. All that has to be rethought, and that's what we have a passion around ourselves, which is the engagement early, right, from the partner, whoever is involved with that client, in setting and aligning with that strategic vision and the outcome that they need, and then designing the solution for that consumption and that adoption and the iteration and thinking out, right? And the thing that used to drive me crazy was you'd have an account team that's like, okay, here's your business case, and it would stop
there
right here. And I'm like, okay, what does that look like as we're 18 months from now, 6 months, before, like right after hypercare. So for us, we're super focused on that first 12 months. How do we accelerate that ROI and get them on the right path and journey? And that to me is the shift in the partner ecosystem that largely has been driven by SAP too, which is like, think differently. We are. Yep. If you're looking at your business like you did deploying software 20 years ago, you're already irrelevant.
We've gone live, tick the box. For me, go live is just a point on a timeline.
Yeah, that's it.
It's day one. There we are.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, let's end on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
What a great week we're going to have here.
Indeed.
I'm super excited.
Yeah.
Thank you again for taking
No,
the time.
thank you for having me.
I've really appreciated us working together, and we're going to accomplish some more great things here.
I look forward
for the end of
to
this
a
year.
lot more shared success for our customers.
Yeah, amen.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for joining this episode. If you like what you saw here, please like, subscribe, or follow. And if you've got any comments, we're certainly interested to hear what you thought with this great conversation that I had with Vicky.